We are back on. We are reconvening as the West Palm Beach CRA. This is July 1st, 2019. It is 6:46 p.m. and we are reconvening with item number 5, resolution number 19-27, authorizing the purchase of 314 Clematis Street for the development of the 12x12 pop-up to rent program and thoroughfare. Mr. Ward, you were in the middle of a presentation. I don't know if you want to summarize what you said and carry on.
Madam President, Commissioners, I do not, all I need to do is just recap what I had said earlier. My presentation earlier was a reminder of the Commission that the CRA is certainly in the development business, and we view this as a very important key part of the redevelopment of Clematis Street, which will tie Clematis back into the alleyways, which we're currently about to start reconstructing and move us in a different direction from a retail standpoint. It was the goal of this board, and staff has followed your direction in trying to move this project forward. I'm here to answer questions, and we have additional presentation from Mr. Rugg if you desire it on the retail elements of it. However, I'm requesting that this board consider this evening that this is a real estate exercise. I'm asking you for permission to purchase 314 Clematis for an agreed upon price, which you've already agreed upon. None of the terms have changed. The funding has been arranged in our bond, and we are ready to move forward with it, and I'm certainly here to answer your questions on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. And to that point about not having that presentation, I asked this at agenda review, and I want to get an answer again, is that the CRA is suggesting that we move forward with this purchase regardless if we housed the 12x12 program in this building. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
The purpose of the, if I could, Madam President, the purpose of the exercise was we looked at business conditions on Clematis Street, and again, this is over a couple of years ago, and the fact that most of the conditions there, many of the businesses were driven by alcohol sales and its attendant issues around those things. None of our property owners seem to be moving in a direction that we're creatively looking for a way to repurpose some of the structures and look for a more creative way to address the development there. And you'll recall this building formerly, of course, had a nightclub, which went out of business or closed for a variety of reasons, whatever. And we had another tenant that came in, another restaurant that had approached the building owner about taking this location. And they had looked at the conditions in the street, and they came and hung around for a while, a few evenings, and just to look at the general tenor of the street. And for a variety of reasons, but mostly based on the condition of what they saw, the way businesses were being conducted in the evenings here, they took a pass on coming to the city. And they were a multi-unit restaurant chain. I've certainly seen them next to some very active bars and things like that. So whatever it was that they saw, and I don't know what it was that they saw, but whatever it was that they saw made them make a decision that Clematis Street was not the place for them. And I will tell you that immediately after we heard them taking a pass, because we had high hopes that they would take the street in another direction and help maybe get a little older client or somebody with a little more money, or just somebody that wasn't, just as I said, purely an alcoholic-driven business. We had high hopes that that would be successful, and when they did not take the lease opportunity, I called their agent on the phone and offered them a significant amount of money toward their build-out to have them reconsider. We offered them, I think, $250,000 towards what was supposed to be $1 million build-out if they would come and reconsider. Why don't you come back and give us another shot at you, and let me help it make a little less painful and that kind of thing. They took a pass. No negotiation, didn't ask me for more money, just, nope, we're not interested. So that told the agency that we have some changes that we'd like to scratch our heads about how to take this in a different direction. And that was the whole genus of approaching the 314 project to begin with. The 12 by 12 project was another completely different thing that was running on a parallel track with Mr. Rugg, and he won the award from the Knight Foundation and got funded. And lo and behold, as he got his funding and was looking for locations for his program, this arrived at the same time, so they've become co-joined. And what I'm saying to you is that the 12 by 12 program, on its own merits, is not the reason that we started in this direction. We started in this direction to look at another way toward redeveloping this street. And whether or not the 12 by 12 program is the program that gets housed here, or there's another answer, we're going to look at, we're going to have to scratch our heads about that if we go forward with this acquisition. So all I'm saying to you is the acquisition of the property had merit, in our estimation, from the gun. It still has the same merit, regardless of what the retail component may or may not be, and that'll come back to you. You'll see the development of the budget and the other things that we need to see, but for you to consider. But right now, all I'm asking for you to do is consider whether or not you want to stick a spade in the ground in Clematis Street and see if we can't take this thing in another direction, and that's all.
Comments, questions? Commissioner Schoaf?
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Ward, for the presentation. I think it's beneficial to kind of talk about how we got here, because we got here at the direction of some of this commission. We have new commissioners, but we started off looking at a program to help small businesses. The very last vote, which I sat alone on a 4-to-1 vote against spending money on a building that we didn't own. And so in order to, I think, look at alternatives to still improve Clematis Street, we as a commission directed the CRA to get here. And one of the things that played into my support of getting to this journey was looking at kind of where we've been. And Mr. Ward, you can tell me if I have some different circumstances in 2 different areas that I can think of, which is the Lot 23 program, of which we own the apartment building, we lease out the apartment building, and if we are investing in ourselves, as I anticipate we are, through the anchor site and development, will be a beneficial real estate endeavor for the CRA.
Absolutely.
So there's that instance, and then not too long ago, we put in a bid, or we authorized the CRA to go into the foreclosure sale for the convenience store at the corner of Palm Beach Lakes and Sapodilla. Yes. Which I think, if we look at the spirit of whence we came, in this, we were trying to take a building that was blighted and improve it, and we've kind of set the precedent in that direction. So am I wrong in thinking that this is akin to those 2 transactions?
Well, Madam President, Commissioners, if I could, for instance, in the Lot 23 example, that's a program where we've got a residence program for artists, and they perform public benefits, teach in the schools, work with the CCE and Northwood Village. We subsidize the rent for those artists. I would suggest to you that the rent that they're paying now, and we're fixing to raise it, by the way, but the rent is significantly less than 50% of the street rents. And we do that because they provide a public benefit. They are teaching, they are growing in that community, and we consider it a significant benefit. So it's in some ways almost a direct parallel to what would be the 12 by 12 piece if that went in and we subsidize those rents for a period of time as well. We're investing in the community and the community benefit. We're not trying to make a profit on the building. That's the point. But however, having said that, at some juncture, as we know, we've got The anchor site is out for bid, well, not out for bid, we're finishing the negotiations on that now. They'll develop that, and when those 300-plus apartments go in and the 60,000 square feet of commercial space and the 500-plus car garage is built there, obviously I would suggest to you that our property value will increase, and that will be a good thing for us as well.
And if I may, one final follow-up. I think as we reflect upon the genesis of how we got here, I think it's important to reiterate, I think that there is a middle ground here where we can get immediate occupancy of the building, because while I am supportive of getting this program up off the ground, though I know we're separate yet related, I think that sometimes we view this as a this or that. Either we renovate and put all the businesses in, or we do nothing. And I think that there is a case that can be made where the main goal is to affect and promote our small businesses in the most immediate version. So, you know, as I've reiterated before, I've done construction on occupied buildings. There's ways to do it. If we, you know, move forward with this and decide this is the direction we're going as a commission, I want us to get back to that core focus, which I think is the promotion of the small businesses. If this is a tool to do that, then I think that that's a good option for us to exercise.
Commissioner Riles?
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions. So we're buying the building for, you know, I wasn't here on the commission, obviously. So we're going to buy the building for almost $7.5 million, correct?
Yes, sir. President, Commissioner, we looked at two options here, and the two options were we could buy the mortgage on the building, or we could buy the building. The mortgage was, I think, around $3.5 million. I honestly can't recall now. The obvious, more advantageous course seemed to be to buy the building itself, because that would give us an asset that we own and we can monetize at a later date.
And when this project first started, did anybody look at what the cost would be to try to do the rehab way back when you started versus buying it and then doing rehab? Because I think I understand Commissioner Schultz's position is that now we started off at a few $100,000, and then we ended up at $1.5 million in rehab costs on a building we didn't own.
I don't think we're quite to $1.5 million, Commissioner. I don't have the exact number on me, but understand that the number that you're talking about also includes leasing the building on a temporary basis. We're paying $15,000 a month to lease the building from the current owner, while she holds it in abeyance and doesn't lease it to someone else. So yeah, it's all of those costs, soft costs and everything. So yeah.
And you know, this is how I see this. I look at it, and I don't look at it from the perspective of the two projects that the commissioner brought up. I look at it in terms of the Sunset. That's a very similar project that started off at one amount of money, and now it's ballooned up to, we still don't know what it is. Is that correct?
Well, I've got a pretty good idea, Commissioner, but it has increased, yes.
Okay. And so we don't really even have any, because do we have any kind of construction numbers for this project?
Madam President, Commissioner, I don't have a final construction number on this because we haven't decided what to do. I can tell you that it's probably around $600,000 to finish the demolition work, and that would include removal, I think, of an elevator that's inside, and removal of the back wall. One of the goals of this thing is to go from Clematis all the way to the new alleyway that we're about to redevelop. We're going to start construction on that at the end of this month or first of next month. And what our goal was to blow out that back wall and activate the alley and be able to go, you know, through there. That's why it's called thoroughfare. So I can tell you that we'll have that kind of number in there if we white box it. And we've thought about everything from continuing the 12 by 12 concept to just white boxing it and carving out space like they do at some of these flea markets, you know, where they just put a tape down on the floor and that's your area, and then you, Mr. Retailer, bring in your fixtures and design it the way you want to. Or we could do something interesting like dragging in, shipping carts that we see at the 4x4 celebration. We could have a series of smaller ones of those things that could be rearranged intermittently and also relocated at a later date when we sell the building. So there are a lot of options. We're at the point where we're right in the middle of thinking about this, so I don't have a final answer for you. It'll come back before you, though.
So at this point, we don't have a final answer on what we're going to do with the building. Should we spend the almost $8 million bucks? Mm-hmm. Correct?
Yes, sir.
And we don't even know if once we spend the $8 million, how many more million we would need in order to get it to fruition of whatever concept we come up with. So we're buying sight unseen right now.
Well, I would, Madam President, Commissioner, I wouldn't say that we're buying it sight unseen. I would say that we have, we've gotten very familiar with the building because we've done almost the entire demolition project on the inside, so we know what our challenges are. And it's a matter right now of just restoring it. I think depending on the level, the point I'm trying to make to you is that depending on the level of fit and finish, we could spend $300,000 to whatever number that we wanted to arrive at that point. So it'll be a matter of what you think is a palatable number in the direction that you want to take it in. We'll develop some proposals and show it to this board in a workshop setting, and you'll help us move it forward.
Along those same line of questioning, it's been presented to this commission previously that part of the reason why this was recommended is to move us away from nightclub mentality in a 14,000 square foot facility, which it's been stated that that's probably the only type of lease that would be put here. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And has the CRA or the city looked at other ways to control that type of business from coming into this space, whether it be from just different ordinances or creative ways?
Madam President, I would suggest to you that the most creative way to control what goes in that building is to own it. If it's a private sector building, we're limited in our ability, other than the ordinances that are on the books, to what happens there. If you want to absolutely determine the course of what happens there, if you want to make a statement about what you think would be an interesting direction to take the street in, this is one way to do that, and you will control your fate in so doing.
Thank you. Commissioner Nearing.
Thank you, Madam President. So, as a level set, a couple things. One is the genesis of this project was never to purchase this building. That's not how it was presented. This is just a level set.
Right.
Okay. There were a couple things that we talked about. We talked about how is it that we move away from the nightclub? How do we get out of that business? Historic, Clematis Street, how do we redefine? How do we go to 2.0? And that we felt like this was a way to do that. In addition, running parallel to that was the 12 by 12, which is and remains, I believe, a very solid idea. But I want to be clear, all we were talking about at that moment in time and what we had approved were the modifications.
Yes.
To me, there was an inflection point, and the inflection point was when the costs for those modifications became such that we were, CRA, going to be providing, I don't remember that figure, but well over $1 million
Yes.
to a private business within our city again, hoping for those same outcomes. But I want to be clear about something. The outcomes, it was 12 by 12. It was incubators for these small businesses. It was the alleyway and the thoroughfare and that kind of redesign. And it was, how do we get out of, for this particular space, how do we get out of the nightclub business? The fluid part and the part that is new or newer is purchasing this. That was not how this was presented originally. So I just want to make sure that there's just a clear level set about that what was sold and what we talked about was, how do we make these modifications? How do we support this business owner who was on point with this? She, I believe,
Yes.
Was open to this strategy, had agreed that, yep, we agree with you. It's time to get out of the nightclub business, because it's pretty obvious she probably could have gone back and leased that. So I said all that to say, level set. Couple things. So there seem to be two options. One is as it's presented. The other option is, in the event that the board determines not to purchase the properties, it would be necessary to make modifications, return the first floor to white shell. Could you just talk a little bit more about that option? Like, so we would be spending an additional $700,000 in addition to what we've already spent to bring that first floor back to a shell.
Madam President, Commissioners, no, I don't believe it would cost us $700,000 to white box it. It may cost us $350,000 in addition to what we've already spent on the project. We've got, soft costs and design costs that are obviously not recoverable, and we've already spent money on the demolition, which we may have done to this owner as a grant anyway. We haven't so far done anything we wouldn't have done. It's just we arrived at a point where it was obvious that the cost was going to be more than we had initially thought. We brought that back to you and said, by the way, we're having significant cost overruns. Give us some guidance as to how you want to move. And that's where we got the reaction that, gosh, if we spend $2 million in the building fixing it up, it's like a $2 million grant to the building owner. And I would suggest to you that if the end result was that we got where we wanted to go and the building fundamentally turned the street around, it looked great, and it became our version of Chelsea Market in New York or that sort of thing, we would have accomplished the goal. It would have been an expensive experiment, but it would have shown the way to other folks to do that if that were their desire. And certainly we have, as I said, I've given you examples of other things that we've done to encourage businesses. So it would have been a significant investment, and it was the guidance of this board, or the comment from this board, that it might be, what are our alternatives? We can continue on the path. We can shut down the whole thing. I can white box it and back out of it for that amount of money, or we could go all in on the concept and keep doing what we thought was a good idea to begin with. Except now we were going to end up with the ownership of the building for the period of time that we desired to own it. It's a viable alternative in our estimation. I can tell you that we're getting, the second floor of the building is not fully leased, but it is leased. We're getting about $25,000 a month, or we would get $25,000 a month or so in lease, so $300,000 a year in lease payments from the building that we're not going to have to do virtually anything to. They're just they're there putting up with the noise. So I have an idea that it's not a bad alternative. The great thing about being in the government and the source of income that we have from the bonds is that we don't have a note to make. There's not a mortgage payment. We have to obviously maintain the building, but beyond that, I think it's almost a push from what it looks like the income would be. So, it's just a question of, I think what it comes down to is short-term versus long-term. Our vision here, if we go forward, your vision will be a long-term decision about the street versus a short-term, let's white box it, walk away, it was a bad experiment. We could do either one. It's your choice.
Commissioner Neering.
Thank you, and thanks, Mr. Green. Is there a precedent from the CRA standpoint? And I'm not saying that this is a viable or even a good option, but I'm wondering if it's still an option that exists, a precedent in which we have invested X amount of dollars in a project that we don't own. I mean, obviously, this number had gotten to a point. Again, do you recall the number right offhand?
Madam President, Commissioner, every example that I gave you earlier this evening were investments in buildings that we don't own. The Navarro project that's building the waterfront hotel and that block of apartments right now over on Flagler, again, we've invested 1.2 million, $1.2 million and change on taking that building down, and $1 million in incentives, and the Helen Wilkes site where the new restaurant sits or will sit. We gave them that on a virtually no-cost lease for 75 years. So we'll recover that at some point, but we've invested a significant amount of money to do that. Now, why did we do it? We did it because we wanted more upscale hotels in town. We did it because we wanted to have traffic going on a street other than Clematis downtown. Our city can't be built on a street. It has to be a city, and we need to find ways to get folks off of the main thoroughfare into yet another thoroughfare. So all of these thoughts went into how do we get that project going, and we invested that money, I think, wisely. I don't think there's anybody in the city that doesn't think that that was a good thing to do, to get that end result, that product there. Yeah, everything that we do end up being grants, essentially, but that's precisely, that's the nature of the beast. Now, we get closer to things sometimes. Sometimes we do it as grants. That's an example of a grant. Sometimes we'll do it as the sunset, and that's an example of us functioning as the developer. I mean, we will spend that money. We will own the facility. It will turn that into the city around and be an incredible benefit, but it's going to be expensive. But that's the nature of what we do. That is what we do.
Well, I would, in my last comment, I'll turn it over to my colleagues. I would just offer that there might be different ways to bite at this apple. And I would also say to us, I think there has to be some post-mortem done on this, because, again, it did not start this way. And I realize this is par for the course. But, the item before us tonight is dramatically different than when we started. The outcome remains the same, which is we want all those things that we've already talked about. So I'm just offering that there may be perhaps different ways to.
And I wish that that my crystal ball was working 5 to 7 years from now when we sell the building for $10 million and we look like we're smart, instead of tonight when everybody is beating us to death because we're entering into this kind of thing. But I would suggest to you that it's pretty standard for the kind of thing that we do. It's a large expenditure. There's no question about that. But we're going to, if we're going to make the kind of significant changes in the city that things like this make, I would suggest to you that the $21 million that we're going to spend in the Northwest over the next year, 18 months, will fundamentally change that neighborhood in a very good way, which will not be something that will be the poster child for gentrification, but it will be a very engaged, as it has been, a very engaged growth and embracing of the community. Someone had said earlier, gosh, it's taken years, and it's getting more expensive, and it's taken years to do. Well, don't forget that the reason it's taken years to do is because we this agency deliberately stepped back for 2 years and engaged that community that had no friends, had felt they had no voice in City Hall, and we have had hundreds of public sessions with that community to completely get them engaged in the process and supportive of the project. And sometime next year, I'm going to come back to you with my friends at Parks and Rec, and we're going to talk about Curry Park on the north end. And Curry Park will have the same, I would suggest, the same significant impact on the north end of the city that the work we're doing at the Sunset and all the projects that are around it are going to have for that section of the city. It is going to be expensive, but it's going to be transitory, and it will be the kind of thing that makes the long-term difference. And the price point is going to be a backbreaker initially when we first start talking about it. I've already talked to you'll recall you've hired James Corner Field Operations, the folks that did the High Line, to design it. And his first price point to us, just in the first conversation, was $40 to $60 million if you want to build a world-class park up there. $4.6 million for his design fee and $40 to $60 million to build a park, at which point I choked. And so that's where we are right now, is going back, trying to negotiate that. But those kinds of projects are fundamental points of deflection, as you say. They are the things that make the difference. Or we can build little boxes, ordinary little stucco boxes.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. You brought up the bond and other incentives, and so I just want to clarify for public benefit. This is from bond funding, and it would not impact other incentives or grants that the CRA provides currently, nor does it impact the budget of the city.
No, ma'am. This has the bond funding, of course, will support itself. Obviously, our bond council has looked at what the additional bond debt service is going to be. We've already budgeted about $14 million out of next year's budget and the ongoing budgets. As you know, every budget we do is a 5-year budget, so we've looked ahead. We know where that is. We can pay the debt service. So that's not a concern.
We have a few public comments. Ed Walker, still here? Dinah Lauro and Nancy Pullum. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you for accommodating. Ed Walker, 1700 Embassy Drive, some of you know me. I have to say, I'm really disappointed how just flipped the CRA director is about, $7.2 million. I think we got here because of someone not doing their homework on that building, trying to knock a wall at the backside of a 1923-25 building and realizing you can't do it. I think that's why we got here. So then all of a sudden now, let's buy it. Let's buy it. And I don't hear anything about dealing with the homeless. And this one building, this is what I've heard for years around here. I do pay attention to this stuff. It's, if we move the library, that's going to be the transformative thing for downtown. It hasn't been. Moving City Hall, remember that one? Let's spend 30 million, 50 million, move City Hall. Let's go open up the waterfront. It hasn't brought the people down. And now we're hearing only if we spend the 7.2 million on a building. That was a Woolworths. Most of you probably don't know that. And for those of you who probably never went in there, before it closed, it was actually split in half. It was actually split in half, and there was actually food on the left side. They actually cut it in half. So, this notion that only one person can do all this stuff, it's really a shame. There are other things you could do with that money. And I think with the mistakes that were made on this, that I think have been publicized, well publicized, that you found problems with the building after you started because someone didn't do any engineering studies before you decided to do this. And so what happens? We'll buy it for $7.2 million. It's going to be this transformative thing. I think it's really disappointing. I don't think, and yes, because the statutes say you can do it, I'm an attorney too, it doesn't mean you have to do it. I think there's I don't hear anything about the homeless. I understand you could use it for affordable housing, you could use those funds. But these are the feel-good projects that this individual does. And I think it's bad. I think it sets a bad precedent. Why don't you buy some of these other buildings? The other owners, I'm sure, would like to cash out and have something done to these buildings. And I get people don't like the nightlife, but I think that's what brings the people down. And maybe we should be looking about why West Palm in general, downtown, doesn't seem to get more people. Daytime, it's pretty dead. I'm here every day. I eat out here every day. A lot of you know that. And after 5, it's dead. Tuesday night, it's dead. And you can have all the pretty sidewalks, but we still don't have, what are we doing to get people down here? And I don't think spending $7.2 million on a building to cover up a screw up, I think that's what we should call it, a screw up, because people didn't do, I think, what anyone would do in a building project, get engineering studies and stick it. And yeah, bonds have to be paid at some point, just like the bonds on this building just like the bonds for the library next door. Those eventually have to be paid. But to hear this presentation, oh, it's no big deal. At some point, we'll be faced with having, whether in our lifetime maybe, I don't know. But I think at some point we'll be faced with having to pay for those bonds. Someone will. And I just think a little more consideration to that. And there are other problems, other priorities in the downtown, because I know these funds can only be used in this area, that should be addressed. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Dinah?
Good morning and happy Tuesday. It feels like Tuesday. Madam Commissioner and Commissioners, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. My name is Dina Laro, and I'm originally from Philadelphia, home of the Philly cheesesteak that has reverence in a second. I moved to West Palm Beach in 2010. I now own 2 businesses here with my family, Chunky Dunkies and Dina's Vegan Deli and Desserts. Chunky Dunkies has been in business for over 9 years, manufacturing plant-based snacks, such as this, that you will find in local spots like Subculture Coffee and in major supermarkets like Wegmans. Because of the 12 by 12 project, our second business, Dina's Vegan Deli, was born. We saw an opportunity to do what we love, which is make plant-based food delicious and bring it to a location, Clematis Street, that is demanding this type of food. Dina's Vegan Deli makes plant-based comfort food, and we are now famous for our vegan Philly cheesesteaks and gyros. If anyone is going to create a vegan Philly cheesesteak, it's going to be us, because we were born and bred there. We have invested over 1 year of our time and money in this project and competition, the 12 by 12 project. As a competition, we created videos, reports, we attended every meeting that was held at the DNA. We completed a thorough business plan for the deli and made sure it was a business with a future. We were so excited about this new venture that we started building out our facility even before we heard we won. We leased the building next to Chunky Dunkies in Riviera Beach and turned it into a production kitchen. We created recipes from scratch, bought restaurant equipment, and completed all the legalities to run a food business in the state of Florida, so we were prepared for the thoroughfare. Then we heard we won, but the opening date was pushed to spring of 2019, 2 months ago. So we decided to open a temporary grab-and-go on site where we could test the market. We built a website, advertised on social media, gave out flyers, did local events, and even did a brief cooking segment on Channel 5 News. This was 6 months ago. Now we have customers coming from Orlando to Miami. The ones that are not from Florida found us Googling vegan restaurants. We are extremely proud to say that we have over 50 5-star Google reviews. We have created such a great business in 6 months, but we are in the middle of nowhere in Riviera Beach. Our business needs Clematis Street, and we feel Clematis Street needs us. Plant-based food is where it's at. Just look at the demand for Beyond Meat. They can't keep it on the shelves. Vegan or not, people want to eat food that tastes great. It's the way it's moving, and I am committed to contribute to that movement. We make Dina's Vegan Deli and Desserts a destination for all those all over the globe.
Thank you, Dina. Your Chunky Dunkies are amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Nancy Pullum.
Good evening, Nancy Pullum. I don't know about you all, but I'm exhausted. I feel like I just was in a dance marathon or something, listening to all this rhetoric. And I want to back the truck up just a minute on something. I don't know how we got onto the hotel and the old City Hall site. That City Hall site belonged to the city. It did not belong to the CRA. Now, the CRA may have put some money into it, but let's get clear on something. That money, that property was sold to Frank Navarro. And the city reaped benefit by selling that property. So I just wanted to make that clear, and I don't want to use up all my time on it. As a prior speaker said, because you may doesn't mean you must. CRAs, there's been legislation in the state of Florida that's rejiggering CRAs a little bit, and it is because of concerns that have happened in how the money's been spent and whatever. CRA money's not monopoly money. CRA is the one agency that really should strive to put itself out of business. And until it does, the entire city's suffering, because all of the increased revenue that funds the CRA is captured there and doesn't go into the general fund for everything else that's falling apart in this city. So when we say, oh, it's covered by the bonds, and oh, well this, and oh, well that, you don't understand the impact that kind of thing has on people all over the city who've got potholes and no streetlights and safety issues. So I'm all for the CRA, and the CRA was intended for economic development, and it's for the rising property taxes from the investment. But to sit here and to read and to hear a justification for spending $7 million that's covered by the bonds, that's tax dollars. It's not pretend money, is offensive to me as a taxpayer who does not complain about paying my taxes. And it doesn't speak well, doesn't play well to the audience of taxpayers out here that because somebody goofed up, now we should be landlords? We've got other things to do besides property management and being landlords in this city, I do believe. And we haven't had a good track record in estimating the cost of these jobs, so that things just keep going on and on and on. And then you hear 30 minutes of all this other money that's going to be spent everywhere, and it's all just, yeah, and I'm going to have something for you here, and I'm going to have something for you there. I'm sorry, Mr. Ward. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but the way you pitch makes it sound like there's this mountain of money somewhere. We live in this city. We're concerned about these things. And my grandmother used to have an expression, don't throw good money after bad. And that's what comes to mind here. I would urge you not to approve this.
Thank you, Nancy, so much. Your time is up. Thank you. Are there any other cards? Nope. Additional thoughts, comments? Yes, Commissioner Neering.
So regardless of tonight's vote, I guess one of the questions I have, because to me, again, it was the genesis of this conversation is the 12 by 12. It is what, no matter what we decided tonight, what we decide tonight, there's going to be quite a bit of time between if we were that particular structure before the actual businesses can benefit from it. Is there any plan B? Is there any temporary housing? Is there any thoughts of what we might consider just given that? I mean, we heard from one of the businesses tonight, and again, as one of the commissioners who was up from the very start, was up here from the very start, it was always 12 by 12. Again, that's how it was sold. And I'm appreciative of that because I'm supportive of that. That's changed a little bit. There's no judgment in that. It just has. That's just the reality of it. So I said all that to ask the question, and I don't know if Mr. Rue can answer it, if Mr. Ward, if you can answer it. Again, this vote will come in the next 5 or 10 minutes, but what about the 12 by 12? What about tomorrow with the 12 by 12?
Chris Rue, Director of Economic Development for the City of West Palm Beach. So you want to know what's the question so I can help?
I mean, are we basing everything on tonight's? Because I thought I just heard, and I wasn't here for agenda review, so I thought I heard almost a decoupling of the 12 by 12. In other words, maybe I misunderstood it, but even if this project were to move forward, there's no guarantee ultimately it would house the 12 by 12. Maybe I'm making that up. My question is,
what happens after?
Forget 314. Is there another plan for 12 by 12 regardless? Because even if 314, even if we moved forward and approved it, Chris, we're talking 24 months maybe? I don't know. I mean, maybe a long time before that building is built out. Right. So then we're 3.5, 4 years on the clock. So my question is, what's happening with those 7 businesses that are a part of the 12 by 12?
Okay, so to answer your question, there isn't a formal plan B. The only thing that we've done is had internal discussions between myself and folks at the DDA and a little bit with the CRA, but it's just been kind of like, what should we do in the event that this thing does fall apart? And it's mostly around, well, we would have to find another problem. Well, first we would have to go back to Knight Foundation, just give them an update, and understanding that they are okay with us continuing to move the project forward, we would have to find another location that is suitable, and then obviously bring that up to the, also brief all of the businesses, and hopefully they're willing to stay and participate. But it gets a little technical because four of those businesses have signed leases at 314 Clematis Street right now, with Anna Caballero and Trifecta. So that's another fly in the ointment. I don't know what happens to those leases if we decide to move the project to another. I assume they have to be honored at some point.
So, you know, when I was considering this, and I spent a lot of time in the past week and this weekend researching this, one of the things that I considered was if my colleagues and I were going to consider this because we've invested so much or because we had leases already. And that's why I asked my initial question is, you know, let's look at this separately from 12 by 12 and determine if this is a good move for our CRA dollars. I am very much in favor of the 12 by 12 program. I think it's a great program. I understand that we were selected out of, I think, over 5,000 applicants for this program, and I think it will do a lot for our small businesses like Dina's. But I think what we're talking about and looking at is this a good use of our CRA dollars? And I do not believe that any of us feel that it's monopoly money up here. I think we take it very seriously, and we understand the ramifications of bond funding. You know, I have really been considering all of this and understand that sometimes the city and the CRA needs to, you know, be the leader in what we want to see happen in our city. And, you know, one of the questions that I talked to Mr. Ward about while considering this was, what are the #1 priorities and initiatives? And you identified one in each of the areas that you're working in. And in downtown, you told me that this is the #1 priority right now. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. What I said was that the Clematis corridor is our #1 focus, and certainly this is part of it. The rebuilding of the street is part of it. The rebuilding of the alleyways is part of it. Everything that revolves around the Clematis effort is the rebuilding and rebranding of downtown, and yes, that would be our #1 project.
So my point of that is saying is that sometimes we have to be the proof of concept, right? And our resident spoke up and said, you know, this was Woolworths. We had JCPenney's on this street before. So we have space that was built for retail that does not exist in this area anymore. And I think it is a big decision that we have here, but I think that you know, if the leadership is saying that we want to see change on this corridor, that we need to be the ones to step up and invest and be leaders in this. Commissioner Schoaf.
I just want to make a couple points of clarification because I don't think the gravity of $7 million is lost on anyone up here. That $7 million are bond funds. They are taxpayer dollars. They cannot be used for things like homelessness, like the general things that we as a city are spending money on otherwise, correct? These are capital bonds.
Yes, ma'am.
So as we're looking at kind of what the goal was, the way that I look at it is the original point of doing this was to have a different use, to eliminate a nuisance. And where I try to look at my decision making is, is this location based? Is it situationally based? And I got to be honest, you know, one of the things in the Northwood Pleasant City CRA we've been asking for a long time is to do away with a nuisance convenience store. And while the price tag is significantly different, if I could get the opportunity to have the CRA do away with that nuisance tomorrow, I would. And I think the best way to do that is to control what you put there. You know, we've had instances of neighbors getting together as a collective and purchasing a nuisance property. We've had examples of how that works, and I think one of the things that was new information to me tonight was that there are tenants, and this is an income-producing property to some extent on the additional floors. So, you know, I think that plays into the decision a lot as we consider where we're going, and I think that we do have to start with ourselves, and the best way to control it is for us to own it.
Commissioner Nearing?
I think too that this is important because we've used Sunset as an example, and I think rightfully so. But the biggest difference, between this project and Sunset is that, in my estimation, we had an absentee landlord at the Sunset project. I mean, what we have on Clematis, it seems to me, is a landlord who is at least amenable to some of our suggestions, and if she weren't, we would not be here, because the answer would have been no from the very beginning. So to me, again, and I appreciate us using the Sunset as an example, but I really see it as apples and oranges, because to me, it was slum. It was run as such, and there was no intention on behalf of individuals to do anything better with that location. That's my opinion. So I just wanted to say that, because again, we've used the Sunset as a parallel to this project, but I see them very differently.
Commissioner Peduzzi?
Thank you, Madam President. I think I'm struggling a little bit with this right now because I think the whole reason that we've invested so much time and effort in this property, it was towards a particular purpose. The 12 by 12, as I understand it, and I guess I wasn't here necessarily way back, but the 12 by 12 concept was something that was important to us and that we wanted to see come to fruition. And that was the particular purpose for looking at that particular location. Let me just ask, because I think this is just going to help me clarify the situation for my own edification in making a decision here. We understand that it's important on Clematis Street to have appropriately sized space for smaller businesses. And as you said before, indicated before, nightclubs are probably the only type of business that could fill such a large space, or it would be the most likely form of business. Right now, are we aware of any other properties on Clematis that would offer the ability for us to fulfill this particular purpose, maybe without purchasing a property? Is there anything even available right now? Is there anything available for rent, for lease, that would enable us to do this project without purchasing a building? I just wondered, are we familiar with any property like that?
Why don't you speak to that?
Chris Rugg, Director of Economic Development. So there are several properties that are available for lease. I mean, if you walk down Clematis Street, you can see the signs that are up. 522 Clematis Street, which is on the 500 block. It's owned by, I believe, Michael Paul. It was going to be a theater. 313 Clematis Street, which is right across the street from 314 Clematis Street, which is also very large. That's owned by Jeff Green, and that building needs a tremendous amount of work as well. I'm not quite sure what's going on with the My Medici space on the 200 block. That is currently, but that is built out as a restaurant right now. That would probably be a little bit trickier to accommodate the plan that we were going to, which is, it's great we have the big kitchen, but then you have, how do you fit 12 businesses in that footprint as well? And then there's also, some vacancies that are available around the downtown that are not on Clematis Street, where, this concept could also be tried. However, all of those require going back and starting with the landlord, and again, making sure that the businesses are still on board with it, and essentially readdressing the project almost from start.
As a follow-up, I guess there'd be no guarantee if we were to lease another property that we wouldn't run into a similar problem structurally, especially if we're trying to incorporate an alley.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on the location and where we're going. I mean, all the projects, all the properties that I just mentioned to you will have their individual challenges. So it's, it's hard to tell exactly what the cost would be at each one.
Thank you.
Commissioner Riles.
Is there anything prohibiting us from getting a better handle on what the out-of-pocket costs are going to be to do whatever project that we've decided that we're going to go forward on? I mean, at this point, we don't even know. I mean, from what I'm hearing from the public is that no engineering studies were done when the rehab.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Is that untrue or that's truthful?
Let me see if I can help clarify. So we essentially, when we did the demolition of the project, we removed all of the nightclubs and exposed the elevator shaft and shelled the space out, and that was done in March 2018. So then we got into, while we were doing all that, we were working on the internal design and came up with an open area footprint to open up the common area spaces and be able to fit and accommodate the 12 businesses, in addition to adding some micro units, which are essentially businesses on the wall, anchored with the restaurant. So, but in order to do all of that, there were specific things that we needed to know about the building. The building is structurally sound. There is nothing wrong with that building, and we know that specifically from an engineering. Contrary to the rumors that may be out there on the street, that building is sound, and we know it because we've actually looked at the footers and we've had them structurally looked at by engineers, where you can actually see the holes in the picture.
So the short answer, Commissioner, is yes, we hired engineers and we looked at it. Go ahead.
So we know that the building is available, and I mean, that's to the point about how much it's going to cost. We're ready to start. We have $1 million already set aside that's been approved. It's just deploying those funding. So the $600,000 that Mr. Ward had mentioned earlier is for that structural work and to finish out the rest of the demolition. And that will essentially take out the back wall, take out the structural or the elevator, the existing elevator, and reinforce the building so that we can make those changes and have that open area footprint. And that gets us started. Then from there, everything else is pending. We don't have the MEP, we don't have, because those are all the details that when we were ready to deploy, we put the stop on until we wanted more direction from the commission.
Commissioner Riles, you had follow-up? No. Commissioner Schoaf?
Just so I can clarify, this is a project concept. So if at any point after this, depending on, of course, what happens today, this board could give direction via staff to do a different kind of build-out that would cost less money, because the engineering portion comes in and taking out a back wall of a building. So we could essentially choose, let's not take out the back wall, let's spray it white, concrete floors, open it up, ready for business. That could be an option.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Commissioner Nearing.
Just another comment. I signed up for this, so I'm not asking anyone to feel sorry for me, but this is a tough position that this commission is in, especially as someone who was on the dais from the very beginning. And again, this was sold as it should have been, with flowers, and it was a love for the 12 by 12, and it was a feel-good story. And we have morphed into something different. I mean, and again, there's no judgment there. It's just, I still want to go back to, at some point, I'd love for us have a post-mortem on this so that we aren't in this position. I get this is par for the course and things change in the life of a city. I'm all for that. But this is dramatically different from where we started. And really to the point where I've heard less about the 12 by 12, and maybe I'm making that up, but it's become about the building, which obviously is the genesis of tonight's decision, but I'm done with my comment.
And if I could respond to you on that, you know, I may have started that conversation about separating it. I very much would love to see this happen there. I think my comment about changing retail is, you know, from years ago when it was Woolworths and JCPenney's on the street, now to the warehouse district, Elizabeth Station, Chelsea Market. I think we are moving towards smaller boutique retail types of scenarios. So I apologize if I brought that confusion on. Any other questions, comments? Staff comments?
Madam Chair, may I make a motion?
Please.
I move to approve Resolution 19-27.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion carries. Thank you, staff. Thank you, public, for coming as well. Thank you, commissioners. If there's nothing else,
No, ma'am.
we are adjourned.
Good job, good job, good job.